Talk a little bit about your philosophy on economic development and how you see City Council working with the Economic Development Foundation.
Well, I don't necessarily subscribe to a particular philosophy, an overall, overarching philosophy for economic development. I do say, though, and I'm on record as saying that the process that we've had in Kerrville for the last several years has been broken. When I was on council before, I voted 3 times not to fund KEDF, not because I was mad at or disagreed with any particular person or even KEDF in general. I just disagreed strongly with how things were arranged and set up and how funding was acquired, the accountability process with regard to, these are the things that we have achieved, here are the goals that we've set and so forth. I just have never really thought that worked. I'm hopeful now that since KEDF, the county, the city, KPUB, and KISD and so forth have all kind of come together to revamp the organization and the funding mechanism for economic development in Kerrville, that we can get off to a new start. And I don't have an opinion. I don't know how it's going to go. I think history's going to, the future's going to show us how it goes, and we may need to make other adjustments. But I think the change that's been made with KEDF in forming the council of stakeholders with funding from EIC is a positive step.
The mayor of the city of Kerrville is elected at large, just like all the other city council members. Aside from actually running the council meetings, what do you see the role of mayor being, and how do you distinguish it from the council positions?
Well, I think that there's the possibility, there's a symbolic possibility there with the force of your attitude or your how you the force of your personality in trying to shape opinion or to gain consensus. I mean, a lot of times constituents want to come to the mayor to ask, or to talk about an issue, and I think that gives us a possibility for me to have certainly an impact in how things are done. But I don't ascribe a tremendous amount of weight to my being mayor versus being a council member, and we all just have one vote. But I think in terms of the direction of the conversation, the direction and the flow of what we're looking at any given time, there's some informal role that the mayor can play in that. So I don't really have a big opinion right now on how I'm going to tackle that, how I'm going to take a look at the agenda that we look at every 2 weeks. But I think those are things that the mayor can have input in that can kind of help dictate and regulate the flow of ideas and things that we're looking at.
Does that in any way, and I know you're going to be developing that approach, but does that in any way involve the kind of direction you give to city staff in helping to maybe rein in the council in terms of micromanaging, or the kind of direction and mandates, assignments, whatever you want to call them?
One thing that I do feel very strongly about is that, number one, direction to staff should come from the entire council. It's not that every council member needs to agree on a direction, but again, going back to my earlier comment, I believe in consensus. I believe in a general agreement that the direction we're headed is the appropriate one. And I very strongly disapprove and disagree with a particular council member going to a particular staff member and directing that staff member, and we need to resist doing that. Number one, that staff member does not work for the council. With the exception of the city attorney, the city manager, and the municipal judge, those are the only 3 that work at the pleasure of the council. So if we're talking about, the public works director or any other person taking, direction from a council member, that's inefficient, it's improper. And now, can I actually do anything about that to prevent a council member from approaching things that way? Probably not, except to point it out and to continually remind the council that that's why we have a city manager, that's why we have a staff hierarchy, and if there's some problem with any department in the city, that's really something that we need to take up with the manager as a council.
Are there any particular issues that you're most anxious to delve into, whether because of personal interest or identified problems?
I wouldn't say there's anything that I'm anxious to delve into. I think that we're going to have to continue to have the conversation as a community about the kind of community, the kind of city we want to be and what we want to do. And I think that there is a serious disconnect between the continual conversation about lowering taxes and paying less for services received, and the ability to improve our infrastructure, for instance. And I think that the conversation about taxation and tax rates from those that are bringing up is genuine. I think that they fully believe that we're paying too much and so forth. But I think, again, once you get in there and you realize what goes into the budget process, how a budget's created, how services are delivered, and what that costs, I don't think there's a tremendous amount of room in our budget on an annual basis, whether it's this year or 5 years ago, to deliver a lot of savings without cutting services. And that's just a fact. We're not a profit-making enterprise. We're a pass-through. And we have to prioritize the services we want to provide at an economical rate and do the best we can. And I think the councils, present and past, since I've been in Kerrville, have done a pretty good job of that. Our maintenance and operations portion of our tax rate right now has actually gone down. The 2010 budget has a lower O&M component than it did in 2009. Our overall rate went up ½ cent to account for bonds that were issued in 2009 to address infrastructure projects. We're going to have to continue to do that. We've got streets that are broken. We've got water and wastewater issues that we're going to have to continue to deal with. I understand that we've got an opportunity now to put in another dual-use well, a production well with ASR. That would be ASR number 4. And we're one of the only cities in the state, or really in the country, that can do the aquifer storage recovery system because of our geography here. And I think we need to continue to exploit that. So, so that's a long question to a short answer. I'm not anxious to delve into that, but I think we need to confront the issue that the poor state of some of our infrastructure is not consistent with growth. It's not consistent with economic development. It's really not consistent with the overall health of our community. And if we say that that's true, then that's not consistent with continually hounding about taxes and saying that we need to reduce taxes.
How do you reconcile those two things? The public that continues to go on about the tax rates but the desire for services, and whose job is it to do the educating?
Well, I don't know. I think part of the job falls with the taxpayer. I mean, the decision that you make is, I want to live in a city where the water comes on, the streets are paved, the fire department and the police come on time, and that I'm able to avail myself of the services that I pay for. And I think you also have a responsibility to elect leaders who enact budgets that are fair and balanced, and that address the things that the citizens want. I think sometimes, as one citizen in a city the size of Kerrville, I feel a little disconnected from what the citizens want. So, and I think we all probably feel that way from time to time. And so, rather than, as some people do, continually hound or pound the table on the tax rate, I would rather talk about what kind of community do we want to be? Where are we headed? What is it that people want to pay for? And that's not something that's going to get resolved during my tenure as mayor. That's going to be an evolutionary and ongoing process. To the extent that I can contribute to it for the next couple of years, then I'll be there to do that.